Welcome to another episode of Learning Happy Hour. This is a bonus special episode where we do a full interview with Richard Kim. Richard Kim is the manager of eTAC and support, and we talk about things like
upgrading to PanaOS 9.0, how to prep yourself before you begin a TAC case, and what to be ready for there.
We also talk about what he's interested in terms of the future, and Mitch describes how groceries can go bad if you leave them out too long.
So we hope you enjoyed this episode of Learning Happy Hour.
Cheers.
Cheers.
It's that time again. It's Learning Happy Hour with Mitch and Jason. BYOB and bring your own brain. Cheers.
So, Richard, we're so glad that you're here. And so tell us again what you do for Palo Alto Networks, what your role is.
Well, I manage the eTAC team in North America. The eTAC team, yeah.
Electronic Technical Assistance Support?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because we like to change the E to whatever we think it fits best.
Yeah.
Technically, it's called the engineering tech.
Oh, okay.
But we sometimes change that E to be escalation or education or enablement.
So you do a lot of training on the support calls?
Yes, we do. Yes,
wow.
We do. In fact, we do all of the support training when we have new software releases, such as 9.0.
Nice.
So that's one of the main reasons Mitch and I wanted to talk to you. And I know 9.0 is coming out, and we're very excited. So what should customers know before they upgrade to 9.0?
Well, first of all, I think the first thing they should look at is, will my platform support 9.0?
I mean the physical firewall box.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Some platforms, for example, some of our legacy older devices cannot support 9.0, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Right? The size of the memory of the boxes when they respect was obviously for a different use case. So as the years have gone on and we've increased our capacity and more features, it's getting harder and harder to support to properly support all of these new features that we're adding. So as in the best interest of our customers, it made a lot of sense, I think, to not just blanket support all of the old legacy platforms, just the ones that can really handle the new features.
Is the list of supported firewalls the same as for 8.1's launch, or is it changing?
So there are some new platforms, of course, with 9.0, and those will require 9.0. They're all centered on the 7000 series platform.
Okay. So they'll start only 9 and then go from there.
That's correct.
Interesting.
Yeah. But all the legacy platforms like the 5200s, the 3200s, 3000s, those will easily upgrade from 8.1 to say 9.0. So shouldn't be any problems there.
I think it's funny you call the 3200 a legacy platform when it's still brand new to us.
That's very true. Yeah. Maybe that was the wrong choice.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
I should have said platforms that we already have today.
Right. Or, deployed. The 200, the 500, and the 5000 will not get 8 or 9.0 support?
Correct.
What about the 3000?
3000 will still.
Okay, interesting. All right, so it's probably not a platform or a model number reason. It's probably under the hood componentry that's driving that. Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah. So the other thing to keep in mind when you're upgrading to 9.0 is you want to review whether or not you really need that feature at this point in time. So one of the challenges I think we hit all the time, there's always going to be that balancing act of trying to get the most security you can get. And obviously, with the new features, we add a lot more security capabilities.
Yeah.
And then there's always that balancing act of also making sure my network is stable. And that sort of balancing act is something that every customer has to weigh.
Right.
And depending on what your priorities are, if you're more concerned about having a absolutely rock solid, no issues, I don't want to get a call at 2 a.m. kind of a network, then probably sticking around on some of the older branches, the more mature releases, makes sense, as opposed to maybe jumping right away on another.
So they need to be sure they know what they're getting when they go to 9.0.
That's right.
Now, it shouldn't be a blind upgrade.
Absolutely.
They should inform themselves about what features are going to be included in 9 and whether or not they actually need those features at that time.
Right.
And then weigh, of course, the priorities
Right.
of the mission and the stability as you're referring to.
Exactly. And I also like to always encourage our customers, if they have the ability, for example, to run in their labs ahead of time, run it through realistic scenarios because everybody's environments are going to be different. And as best as we try to test for as many situations as we can, but we just can't test for all that are tens of thousands of customers we have in their different deployments. So really, test environments, or if there's a less critical site that they want to trial it on first, that's what I would recommend.
Easier way into it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I want to highlight something you just said there, because the terminology we use inside this building, so we're at HQ this week, I don't know if we said that, it may not necessarily mean the same thing to everyone who's not familiar with how we operate. So when we say stability, I liken it to, networking guys. If we were raised as networking guys, our focus was uptime. Always uptime.
Right.
No matter what.
999.
Exactly. The bits must flow. Whereas security guys, if I was raised as a security guy, my focus is no threats. I don't care if I suffer uptime if I stop a threat. Mm-hmm. And so the consideration you give, I think is very valid. I mean, are you 100% concerned about uptime? If that's the case, maybe don't jump on day one to 9.0 because of unforeseen bugs or things that potentially could cause small outages. Or do you need bleeding edge security features, in which case maybe 9.0 would be better for you?
Absolutely. And I think every customer will have their own sort of, they'll have to have their own assessment on where they sit on that. I think the majority of our customers like to sit somewhere in between. I like to think that, everyone, of course, wants both. Yeah. But the realities, of course, are always very different, right? And I think the thing that I like to if I were in their position, to think about is that while we always try to do our best to add new features that are going to help them from a security posture point of view, keeping in mind that they've already got a lot of great features they're already using today. I mean, really some of the past sessions that I saw, there was discussions about neural filtering, right? And there's a lot of features and functionality there, for example, among other things. So I think it's not like we're leaving them into a black hole, if you will, of security. They're very secure already. Mm-hmm. It's just we're just adding more.
2 weeks ago in our last episode, we were talking about the best practice assessment tool, mm-hmm. and how so many customers aren't following either best practices, or there's a lot of features they haven't implemented which are designed to secure them. Yeah. So if you're not already implementing the things that are fully tested and fully stable, what is your main motivation for going to newer code? I get where you're coming from.
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
Out of the new features, I'm just curious, what is like the standout feature in 9.0 for you? Like, what are you really excited about?
That's a really good question, because there's quite a few really cool things coming in 9.0. I think one of them for me would be our new DNS security that we're adding, right?
Yeah.
New subscription-based model that's going to just essentially really, really add to what we already do today in such a significant way. Mm-hmm. So that to me is a big one for me. HTTP2 inspection is another big one.
How oftentimes upgrade issues are towards the top in terms of the volume of calls people call in about. I don't know if that's still true. I don't know. But what is your take on what are some of the? I guess I'm asking if that's the case, if that's true. What is it that customers could know or do differently so they're not actually they could avoid making those calls? So, I don't know if I'm even asking that question. Does that
make sense to me? I mean, is there anything that we could tell customers about upgrades that would potentially benefit call volumes to TAC?
Lower the calls, basically.
So I think a lot of the issues we see are not necessarily the upgrade process itself. It's more the aftermath after they've upgraded to a release, something went wrong. But I will say this. One of the things I see a lot is the methodology that folks use to upgrade would be, I think there's this prevailing thought that you always have to upgrade to the .0 version of the release first, and then to whatever you want to get to, right?
That's an important thing.
Yeah, that is an important thing, because I think people don't realize that you just have to download the .0 image, which is what we call our base image, but you don't have to actually install that image. You just have to have it on the box. We use that to validate when we do config migrations. But they can jump directly to, say, the maintenance release, say like the .3 or the .4 or something that we know to be stable. and they don't have to go to that .0, which may or may not be 100% stable since it's the brand new release.
Okay, so as an
That's number
example, they're 8.16 and they want to go to 9.05.
Right.
All they would need to do is download the 9.0 bits,
Correct.
but not install it,
Not install it.
and then they can install the 9.0, download and install 9.05.
Once that's available, yes. And then that way they can jump straight to a version that is considered a stable version.
Right. That was entirely hypothetical.
Yes.
Right. That was just
Entirely hypothetical.
But the point being that they can have the bits on the box without having to go through the
Correct.
installation, because that means
Correct.
additional downtime, right? As the boxes, you can
Yeah,
save
that's the other
yourself.
added benefit too is that you don't have to do 2 reboots of the box. You just do 1.
Right.
So it's less downtime for the customer too.
I use
solves a lot of problems.
I use a shopping analogy to describe this when I tell students about it. I say, let's say you go to the grocery store and you get home and you set the groceries on the counter. And let's call those groceries 9.0. And you just get distracted, life kids, and you don't put them away. And then the next day you go to the grocery store and you get similar groceries like milk and stuff. So you left milk out overnight, it's no longer good. Cereal's going to be fine though. So when you get back from the grocery store with the second day's shopping, you can transfer the cereal from the previous days into the new bag and then make meals out of that. But anything that you didn't need because you rebought it the subsequent day, it could just stay there on the counter. So that's what I mean by when we go to install a sub version or a maintenance version, if we've got the major version downloaded, when there's a package referenced by this maintenance version that's not included in that file or that zip, I guess what it is, he'll just go grab it from the big download, which is just waiting, for whatever you need. Not a good analogy? All right.
I got lost on sour milk. I'm like, what?
All right.
I think it's not entirely accurate.
All right, fair enough. Some students were like, oh, but didn't land, I guess. We're cutting that part out.
No, just because you put that in there, we're keeping that part in. And I think just the look on Richard and my face is worth keeping it in. Sour milk. Code does not sour, folks. Code does not sour.
It's true. All right, let's move on.
Just becomes yogurt. Just it's
Changes form. Matter cannot be lost or destroyed. Grocery.
Now you said that was one thing. Did I cut you off? Was there another thing that
Yeah.
customers should?
Well, that's the biggest thing I see. Otherwise, the only other thing would be take advantage of the high availability, right?
People.
Upgrade
Oh, I see what you're saying. Just upgrade one and leave the other.
Yeah, one of the things I think this is something that may or may not be best practice. So I want to be a little bit careful when I say this. But one possibility they can do is they could upgrade, say, the passive firewall into, say, 9.0 something, and then keep the active running an older release. Now you will lose configuration sync and session sync. You will lose that. Well, you may not lose session sync, but you will lose configuration sync for sure. At least during that time.
So that I have that set up at home right now. I'm running a beta version of 9 on my passive firewall, my active. Well, actually, he's active right now because I switch roles.
Yeah.
But I did notice I lost config sync, but the session sync still.
The session sync should still work.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. But there's always that chance that maybe there's an incompatibility between an older and a newer release. We normally test for that, but you never know. Having said that, though, running for that maybe for a day or 2 days or whatever makes sense, and making sure that there's no issues before you go ahead.
Or between maintenance windows or something.
Yeah, that way you have a quick way to fail back in case something goes wrong.
Nice.
And you'll be back on your stable version again. So,
What about downgrades? What if they upgrade to an OS and they need to go down for whatever reason? What does that look like?
so this is another, I think, personally, my personal best practice is back up everything. Back up your configs. The biggest problem I think you'll run into if you downgrade is if you didn't have a good config. When you do an upgrade, it prompts you it automatically saves the last config you had on that version. But if you've made changes to that config in the future, downgrading, you're probably going to have to select that version of config that was old.
Right, because the configs are tied to features, and those features are tied to a version of PanOS.
That's right. Yeah, so making sure you back up everything. So
Yeah,
it's always a good idea to back up. I regularly back up my configs on my own firewall.
Nice.
I even do a tech support dump every once in a while just to make sure I have all that bits of information.
Yeah, sure.
You never know. Backing up configs, the system states, I think that's a very safe thing to do, and it's very I would consider it a best practice.
Okay. Yeah, agreed. I have a question similar or along those lines. There's a new 9.0 feature where Panorama can now push master keys down to firewalls, as well as you've got an auto renew feature for master keys built into firewalls. So the likelihood of you losing a master key should be now greatly reduced. Now, I've had some support engineers tell me in the past that they discourage customers from changing their master key, but our master key, our default master key, has leaked. So it's not secure at all, and it's used to encrypt passwords and private keys on the firewall hard drive. With these changes in 9.0, is eTAC and eTAC going to change their guidance to customers in favor of greater securities? So yes, you should be changing your master keys from now on. Is that something that's come up?
That question hasn't come up, but I tend to agree with you. I think that should be a practice, right? Of changing master keys at some regular cadence, right? Just like the best practice for everyone is you should be changing your passwords for your bank accounts on a regular basis, and all that kind of standard.
All right, makes sense.
Security posture thing. Having said that, we haven't really talked about it, but I think depending on how things go with the new enhancements, I think if I were to look at this from a support perspective, which is unfortunately what I always do, is again, what can go wrong, right? And that's what we're constantly eTAC. We're constantly looking at things that maybe could go wrong or has gone wrong and track it. And depending on how things go, if we see something is working without issues, then we would definitely encourage it. Absolutely, why wouldn't we? Right. So, but obviously, if we start seeing issues with it, then we may.
Story changes. And I completely get why it was discouraged in PANOS 8.1 and older, because if your master key expires, you have to factory reset the box in order to gain control of it.
Yeah.
It's very bad, yeah.
You mentioned in our earlier conversation about your excitement about the cloud. Well, what are your thoughts about cybersecurity in general and where we're going as a company?
Yeah, I actually feel like we've really turned a corner in that area, and I'll tell you why. First of all, the fact that we're now able to secure more customers who don't necessarily have to get their own infrastructure in place and manage their own firewalls, and I think one of the things that was brought up was the best practices and how do we turn on all the right features, right? And we can do that for them, right? So that we can actually
in cloud environments.
Better. I think the key in general for best security is that everybody has to kind of do the same thing, right? We all have to do our best to try to protect ourselves, because if one company gets compromised, that could have ramifications.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So this is why I think the cloud is really a really cool thing to me, is that if we can actually manage for them with all the best practice and turning on the right features, we could actually be in a better position to do that. That's part one. And the other part is also we can't do it alone, right? I think it's generally common knowledge that no one vendor can do it all. So the application framework, that to me is a huge thing. I mean, I think if we can basically say, okay, we're great at this, we're not so great at this, maybe XYZ company is actually really good at this, they can actually use our application framework. Now everybody benefits. Right?
Oh, absolutely. It's an ecosystem just like Apple built with their marketplace. Yeah. I'm very excited
That's
as well.
Exciting. And I'm really curious to see down the road, maybe 2 or 3, 4 years down the road, we look back and say, wow, that was actually a turning point for the industry, not just Palo Alto Networks. So that's what I'm very.
I'm with you. I think it's going to happen. I mean, if you look at just what happened in the mobile phone world, it was BlackBerry versus Nokia for the longest time, and phones
zero
were just
industry to all of a sudden this multi-billion-dollar.
As you use cloud-based products, your relationship with the vendor of that product is going to be much tighter than a standalone. Like if you buy a car and you put all the wrong tires on it, you put all the wrong oil in it, eventually it won't run anymore. Whereas if you're riding a bus, you're using that product for a short period of time, and someone else's job is to maintain it and keep it all safe and healthy for you. So you have greater reliability from the bus than you do in many cases from a vehicle that you mismanage. I don't know if that's a great analogy either, but
I actually like that.
okay, cool. I'm working on it. I'll get there. I'm an analogy person. I have to relate the topic. So if a customer does need to call TAC, whether they don't ever call eTAC directly, right? It's just regular customer support.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
What could they be prepared with to help themselves so that they don't have to do a lot of back and forth Q&A with the TAC individual? How could they be best prepared to launch that first call and get to resolution fastest?
This is the Jerry Maguire question. How can I help you?
Yeah.
Help you.
Help me help you.
Help me help you.
Right?
Yeah.
No, that's spot on. I mean, the more they can provide up front, the better. So at a minimum, the tech support dump file. That is a huge benefit to us. And I would argue that Palo Alto Networks, our tech support bundle that we generate on our firewalls, is about the most comprehensive tech support I've ever seen compared to, say, other vendors I worked with in the past. It provides so much information, including historical information for the last week or so. And
so it does include the stats dump file, or you guys need
yes.
to? Okay.
No, it's part of the tech support bundle.
Nice.
Along with all the other logs that we would reference. So,
Does it include also anything pushed from Panorama, or would you need that also?
we typically would want
So
tech
device
support
state.
from both Panorama and from
Okay.
the devices.
Okay, so full Panorama tech support dump, full firewall tech support dump, and that gives them everything you
Yeah,
need.
and not just, if you have an HA pair, it's not just the active firewall. We usually want them from both firewalls.
Okay, so as many dump files as possible.
Right. And the reason why that's important, too, is also because if, say, you wait a day or two or multi-days, sometimes that information could roll off. So you want to get it as soon as possible, right?
Now, should a customer call in to TAC first thing, or can they create their case in the support portal, upload the dump files, and then call in? Which is best?
I actually think it's best to actually open the case on the support portal first and then call. And
Okay.
the reason why is because when you open up a case on the support portal, you can specify what is the criticality. Is this a high priority issue? Is this a critical issue? If you were to call in blindly without having a support ticket ahead of time, there's a default on that, and it's usually like a medium priority,
Ooh,
for example.
that's good to know.
So it's much better to open up a case first and make sure your priority is set so that when you do call, it's prioritized properly and you get to an engineer faster. So that's a
great.
very, very key tip.
Nice.
And having the tech
Great.
support already installed or already uploaded. Another big one too is also what time did an incident happen, right? That's something that would help us greatly so that we can zero in directly on the file and start looking at that time frame.
There's something that you said I don't want to let fly by,
Right.
and that is you mentioned creating the tech support file at the time that they
As soon as possible.
as soon as
after that
possible.
You said you do training, so customers call in, I guess, like a coach. How do I make XYZ happen? Or do you help them, build their security rules and configure the firewall in such a way that it's giving them the greatest security?
So
Where does the line get drawn, I guess, is my
yeah, that's a
question.
very good question, and I think that's a common one we get as well. Is where does support start and say professional service, and for example, right? And in essence, what you're referring to with say, hey, I need help with the configuration, we can definitely help with that. But if it's what's the best way to configure my rules? Honestly, that's probably not it's not really support's, I would say, wheelhouse to do that, because there's a lot of things that we won't know, right? We won't know what your goals are. We wouldn't know what your traffic patterns are, and for us to try to help without really getting to know our customer, and that's really where professional services comes in.
Yeah, right.
So they build that relationship.
Yeah, they build a relationship. So it's not something that I think we should be doing in support.
agree.
It's more about, okay, I created this rule, it's not working, then we can help.
Gotcha.
Right.
Got it.
Well, Richard, I learned so much. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. I don't know if Jason learned anything, but
I did.
Just
I
kidding.
learned not to leave my milk out.
Oh, right. And-
I learned that too.
Yeah,
So I learn every day too, just like everyone else.
you guys. Thank you so much for your time.
Guys.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.